I'm Kirsten, Rider Experience Agent with Vitus, and it's new bike day. We've got our bike box here in front of us. I'm gonna walk you through the box and how to get your bike set up. First things first, this bike box is completely reusable, so don't get rid of it. Save it for your next trip. It'll help make sure your bike gets there protected. Keep an eye out for the symbols that show you where to open the box. Some of our boxes open on top, some of them open from the side. Look out for this "Hey, look over here" sticker to tell you where to get started to keep things simple. So let's go ahead and get started opening our box on the side that is designated. So just cutting open the tape. One thing to note before we get started, we have QR codes here and here. These will get you started setting up your bike so you don't do anything wrong. If you got to this video from one of those QR codes, congratulations. Okay, so we've got our bike box out of the bike box. We're getting ready to get set up. Just want to point a few things out. We've got wheels up front. The frame is hidden around back. And you'll also find a small bottle of tubeless sealant and this small parts box, which includes a pedal wrench, some pedals to get you going, and a multi-tool. All right, so we're gonna start by setting up our wheels tubeless carefully. Set aside our sealant and pull one wheel out of the box. As you unscrew the valve cap, you'll notice that this is actually also a valve core removal tool, so that'll come in really handy. I like to start by letting out any air that may still be in the tire. Then I can use my valve core removal cap to take out the valve core. And I can set aside the valve core. Shake up our tubeless sealant and swap on the easy hose attachment. Fit the hose over the valve. And inject half the bottle of sealant into the wheel. So at this point you can reinstall your valve core, and we'll inflate the tire with just a regular floor pump. Check your specific wheel manufacturer's recommended settings for how much you should inflate your tires. Okay, I've got this wheel all pumped up. I'm just reinstalling the valve cap, and I'll repeat the process with the other wheel. Okay, so we've got our wheels set up tubeless. At this point, let's turn our attention to the frame. One last thing before we get going. Don't forget that the box that the bike comes in is completely reusable. Hang on to these Volet and Velcro straps. Reuse them before your next trip, or if you're shipping the bike somewhere, to make sure it gets there safe. Easiest place to start to put the handlebars on is to remove the Volet strap that's around the stem. And I'm just going to rotate the fork and the stem to face me. At this point, I can take off the stem bolts and attach the handlebars easily. So we'll unstrap our handlebars that are Velcroed in. So I'm just setting in these screws by hand, and I'll go back and tighten them with the tool and adjust how I prefer my bars to be set up. And then we do always recommend using a torque wrench and following any of the component specifications that you may have. So I'm just gonna make sure this is up to torque. This particular stem says no gap, so I wanna make sure that gap is closed before we move on. So I've got the handlebars installed to the stem. One quick note I wanna point out, if there are any markings on your components, make sure to follow them. For instance, this stem is a no-gap stem, so I need to make sure that the faceplate is secured all the way to the rest of the stem. Okay, at this point we can remove the frame from the box and turn the bike upside down to install the wheels. Okay, so now we're ready to install the wheels. First thing I'm going to do is remove the front through axle. On this particular fork, I do have to slightly undo this bolt so that the through axle will release. Then we'll slot in our wheel, carefully dropping the rotor into the caliper. Insert the through axle, and where needed, do up the bolt as well. So we've got our front wheel installed. We're moving on to the rear wheel. Before we get going, we're going to remove our through axle. as well as this little cardboard chain keeper piece. So we can set this aside and move on to remove the through axle. So before we drop in the rear wheel, I'm going to shift it into the hardest gear, most outboard cog. That'll just create some slack in the chain, make this process a little bit easier. Okay, and we'll just drop the wheel in. The rotor will drop into the caliper, and we can replace our through axle. So we have the axle tightened. The last step is, if you have a Shimano rear derailleur, just make sure to turn on the clutch. Okay, so we've got our wheels on. A couple last things before we get going. We ship all of our bikes with any batteries that they might have already charged. So if you've got SRAM Axis, Shimano Di2, or an e-bike, that battery will come charged, but I still recommend plugging it in, give it some extra juice just in case it's been sitting around and the battery lost a little bit of electricity. Then last thing, let's install some pedals. In our small parts box, we've got pedals, a pedal wrench, and a multi-tool. So I'm gonna grab the pedals and the pedal wrench. Really important, anytime you're installing pedals, throw in a little bit of grease. Something bike specific is preferred, but honestly, if you don't have bike grease, some Vaseline is better than nothing. We just wanna make sure those pedals aren't stuck there forever if you decide to change them one day. So I like to go in with my hex key from the back, find where it fits the pedal, and from there begin installing. And it's worth noting that the non-drive side is reverse threaded, so keep an eye on the threads when you do install your pedals. That one's good, let's do the other one. Okay, so pedals are installed. It's new bike day. Congratulations, that wasn't that hard. Let's go out, let's go shred.